All right, welcome everybody to this week's class. I'm really excited to be introducing Tonya and Michael. I'd love for you two just to tell us about yourself and the company that you have here before we get started, just real briefly so everyone knows who you are.
Okay.
You got it. Okay. So I'm the founder of Brand Face. My journey started years ago selling vacuum cleaners door to door to pay my way through college. I was discovered by somebody in radio, ended up in the sales side of the radio industry for about 18 years after that. Throughout all of that time, one thing that I noticed is the most successful people who were almost always number one in their industries in those markets were always the face and the voice of their own business. So they were the face of their brand, thus Brand Face. So all these years later, that's where the idea of Brand Face came about, as I helped people across many different industries to be the best face of their business. And so in 2013, I actually began to write the first book called Brand Face for business owners. And that's when I met this gentleman, and he can pick it up from there.
Yeah, I'm a trained auctioneer. Actually started in the 90s, right out of high school, selling cars and equipment. And the guy that trained me said, get your real estate license. You might be able to make a little extra money. And I did that. Sold property and cars and equipment around the Southeast. And then opened up my own firm in 2000, although I didn't do anything but buy my own rental portfolio and trade my own properties and save a little bit on the commission. But in 2006, when we started, we saw the start of the mortgage debacle. I teamed with a company out of Irvine, California. We went after the Bear Stearns residential portfolio and got it. And we ended up auctioning off about 75% of that entire portfolio. I ended up licensed in 33 states as an auctioneer and real estate broker. I had an office in Atlanta, an office in Irvine, California, and an office in Seattle, Washington. Went through about 60 or 65,000 residential transactions personally. Came back to home here north of Atlanta and trying to figure out what to do. An agent that I bought a property from tried to convince me to open up a real estate brokerage. So I did so. She came on board with me and helped me with that. Second thing she told me was my marketing was terrible and we needed it, or non-existent maybe. And it's come to find out it was her aunt. So she introduced us through a weird way and, just kept tricking me into calling her, tricking her into calling me until she called me. And I started the Brand Face journey, even though I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time because she had not told me yet that she had written the book. But along the lines, I just listened to what she told me and the things that we're going to share with you guys today. And it turned my brokerage around, and we close more business today in a week than we used to close in an entire quarter. Like, it's just unbelievable. And we do these principles day in and day out. And so that's sort of how we grew into it.
Yeah, that's really cool. You're both you guys have a very diverse background and very different on top of that, like, right?
Very,
like very,
yes.
very different. I've actually never had a conversation with an auctioneer before. Fascinated by it. And the fact that you said licensed in 33 states.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
My goodness, that's cool. Do you do any of that anymore? Just out of curiosity.
I do, actually. Our firm actually still brokers properties, REOs and things in 12 states. And then I'm still what they call a contract auctioneer at some places that I've been there 30 years. And I just, my friendships are there and my buddies are there, and I just can't get away from it. And it used to be that I did real estate to like make a little extra money, and I fed my family through the auctions. And now I do the auctions to make a little extra money. And our main source is two ways, either growing the brokerage that I have that now is up to 28 agents and working on 2 different offices in 2 more states. And we'll be announcing that next week, as well as helping our Brand Face clients in 41 states do the exact same thing that I've done here. So
very cool.
Yeah, we stay very busy. Our children are grown and we don't have anything else to do. And we love it. So
nice. Very cool. Man, I don't have any kids, but whenever I do and they're grown and gone, I hope I have hair that looks like yours. I'm not convinced that it's possible.
Isn't it great?
I think it's a genetic thing, actually. So, but looks great. And Tonya, 18 years in radio sales, you said?
Yeah, it was mostly in radio, but toward the last 4 or 5 years, I was actually working with key clients in that area across all forms of media. I worked for a media company that owned television station, a TV network, radio stations, magazines, 12 different online outlets, a daily newspaper, and weekly newspapers. So, I mean, the list, like, so anything that those clients would need to get their message and brand out to their customers, I had it at my disposal. So I did a lot of what was called back in the day integrated marketing. And that was even a better place to, to do that, because once you put the brand together, it doesn't really matter what the vehicle is to get the message out there. You've got every single thing you need to put it out there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's really cool. Like both of you, again, having some very diverse backgrounds. What made you two decide to start working together? Because you all are also co-hosts of the podcast, Be Bold Branding, right? Like that's also the two of you.
You got it. Yeah. So when we first started working together, we saw Michael was my first real estate brand face client that I had ever worked with. And so I saw, that, wow, this is going so well. And we had such great chemistry working together that I said, you know what, this is going so great for you. Why don't you become a co-author in the next book in the series called Brand Face for Real Estate Professionals? And then the business continued to grow. And so about a year later, I said, hey, you want to be a partner in Brand Face? And so that's kind of where we are today. Michael is the partner and also the COO of the company.
Very cool. Love that. I think I love that that dynamic that you all like found a good niche together and went for it. I respect that. So
I just the secret of my success is just listening to her. That's literally the
nice. That's good.
I know a lot of people say that.
Ladies, give me a high five for that.
That's funny.
There you go.
So, Tonya, something you said early on when you were first kind of describing your background, stuff like that, you talked about how people that were successful in radio, they always were the face and the voice of their own brand. Now, whether that be the show that they had or them personally. And so I kind of want to dive into that as we're really going to start talking into some of how we can avoid some of these branding mistakes. I think we first need a definition of what a brand is, because I think a lot of us, we're podcast hosts or a podcast guest, and we have some sort of brand we're talking about, even if it's us, but we separate a business brand and our personal brand. Can you maybe talk about both and how they translate if they do?
I would love to explain that, because that's not always understood. A lot of times people think, okay, branding is just you're branding a business. It means a logo, you've got your colors right, your packaging looks good, maybe you've got a nice little tagline for your company and you're done, right? First of all, that's not the case. Every business has a story behind it. And in doing business with a business or a person, you get a feeling about that person, right? A brand is a feeling. It's the connection that you have in doing business with that person or that company. But when it comes to personal branding, it is the person that stands behind that company that really makes it so successful. Because what we like to say is people don't do business with a logo, they do business with a person. And when you're face forward out there and you say, okay, I developed this business based on these principles, these ideals, these ethics to help these people with specifically this, then they're much more interested in that business. It just happens that way. People are so interested in the story behind a business and the story behind the person that runs the business. And so those are, they're different. Whereas with a human being, you have that emotional, that human connection to somebody that's much more warm and approachable than it would be to just a logo on a box.
Mm-hmm.
When you mentioned like the whole logo thing, when I first got started in my own business, the first thing I thought about, like, because I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist. Like, thankfully, I now am aware of this and I've improved over the years. When I first got started, I didn't want to launch my business until I had the perfect logo, perfect tagline. The website looked perfect. And it did me a huge disservice because it didn't help my business. Like, people were like, cool, it all looks great, but what the heck is this guy doing? Or like, how is he really going to help me out? It would have been better to build the human element first, which is more so the personal brand side of things, instead of just focusing on like, oh, I got to get it all looking perfect. Ideally, you just get things out there as quickly as you can with, once again, you, the person. As a matter of fact, I'm seeing that like bigger companies moving more toward this as well these days. Like a lot of big companies, we're used to like seeing companies like Coca-Cola hiding behind a big brand. But now if you look at any of their marketing, they're like talking about the community. They're talking about people and things like that, instead of just being like, hey, this is our product, this is what we sell. So they're actually trying to make more of a face to it. And I use that just as one example. I mean, just about any big brand these days is getting closer and closer to making it feel like something more personal. You all have noticed that as well, I'm sure, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's very important because, people don't, I've had the fortune of doing bigger business than some people get opportunity to do, right? We've dealt with some big board meetings of big hedge funds and big banks and been involved like that. I can tell you that at every level of business, people only do business with a person. Like it's all, it doesn't matter. Like it absolutely does not matter how big that company is. Somebody's doing business with a person from that company, period. Like every time, because we're all relational and that's how business is done. Contracts are important. Contracts are argued over and fought over all the time, but it's still the integrity of the other person that you're signing that contract with that is causing you to go in that direction, right? And you hear big companies even talk about that. Well, we've had a great relationship with that person or company for years and years and years. And it's because it's all relationship built.
Mm-hmm. I think about a book that I read years back, and it was one I regularly reference, but it's called Never Lose a Customer Again by Joey Coleman. And toward the beginning of it, he talks about how even companies that are B2B are actually H to H, which stands for human to human. So no matter what, it has to have that form of connection. And if you break that gap, your business will never thrive. And I think a lot of us, because we are either podcast host or podcast guest or a combination that are listening to this or watching this, because that is who we are, we understand the fact that we are doing our best to connect with somebody on the other side of a mic, and that's just listening. It's receiving the content later on, right? So I think we have some understanding of that, but I really want to dive into some ways that we're doing this personal branding thing wrong, especially when it comes to the idea of podcasting. So I don't know how many points you guys have for us today, but I'd love to go ahead and start diving into some of these points that you all have seen as podcast host and podcast guest that'll really help the attendees today.
Yeah, well, let's jump right into it. We got about 6.
Cool.
And I think there's never been, honestly, like Tonya said, we get to operate in a lot of different verticals with different entrepreneurs, right? And podcasters are somebody that already are putting themselves out there in a personal way, but they need to dive a little deeper into this. So they start so when people are looking them up on why they would even want to listen to them, these things are going to stand out. Okay. So the number one most, mistake, I guess is the best way to put it, is people forget to inject the personal. So we're going to start with that because the personal branding is what our book is all about. And so let's make sure that we don't forget to inject the personal. People don't do business with a logo. They do business with a person. That's Tonya's quote from her original book, and we keep it in all of our verticals. People want to know the person behind their business. For instance, Tonya is also an author. She wrote a biography about her father and his struggles with alcoholism. And from where he came from, and he came from the moonshine industry, which was born effectively in the Dawsonville area of Georgia, which is over in the mountains a little bit. What does that have to do with the fact that she's also the CEO and founder of Brand Face and Putting Your Face Forward? It's her story, and that book has actually given us business and brand face because people connect the two. And she's also sharing what her life was like in that book also, and growing up into that. And we have thousands of examples that we can give you of that. There's another one. Bobby Geller is one of our real estate clients in like the Westchester, New York area. He sold billions of dollars worth of real estate, been involved with hedge funds, things like that. He knows what big real estate business looks like. But that's not what's interesting about Bobby. What's interesting about Bobby is he has had over 2,000 consecutive days of mindful meditation at 5:30 a.m. every morning. Think about it, 2,000. It's probably over 2,100 now since we worked with him, where he never misses at 5:30 in the morning. And now you can tune in through YouTube, and he'll teach you how to breathe and how to hold a breath for 2 minutes and let it out over time. Why is that important? It might not touch you. It might touch you. You might think it's all right. You might think that's weird. You might even think it doesn't matter. It's Bobby's personal story, and it's what makes Bobby such a cool dude. And then you start to dig a little bit further and, okay, well, what can Bobby do for me? So don't forget to inject the personal. And this is on all of your verticals, guys, your websites, any of your social media that leads people to your podcast.
So there's a tasteful way to do this, and then there's also going way too far.
Yes.
We've all had a conversation. So for me, like I grew up going to church. I've been a believer most of my life, and I remember when I started serving in my young adult life. occasionally someone would walk through the doors that you would meet, and they'd tell you a little about themselves. And there's other people, and that was great. You could start building a relationship. There's other people that would walk right in, they'd spill some like really intimate stuff, like right when you meet them, and you're like, well, I'm sorry, what was your name again? You know, like my mistake.
Let's start with the name.
And I'm not saying that to be rude or mean, but there is a tasteful way to be able to do this, to inject the personal. How do you recommend finding that balance for yourself and also what your audience is actually interested in?
Great question.
That's a great question. And I actually have had that question as it relates to religion very often as well, because we have a lot of very religious and spiritual people in our program, and we are ourselves as well. And I tell them, you know what, there's really no right or wrong answer as to whether to include that in your presence or your biography, right? It's what you feel you would like to share. I suggest don't overshare, just say, this is who I am. And by the way that you treat people and the way that things are phrased in your story, they're going to know that you are a very religious or spiritual person, and you don't have to say that, right? You don't have to say, I'm very religious, right? You just say it through your actions or some phrasing, within your bio. So we kind of take a look at that case by case. It's kind of hard to answer on a blanket, statement, but we take it case by case. And some people are like, they think, you know what, this is who I am. This is, we have several ministers that are, that are branded in a different industry, but on the side, they are ministers. And they say, if people don't want to deal with me because of that, then they're not my people, which I fully appreciate and understand.
Absolutely. And to tastefully, it is hard to define, right?
Sure.
It's not overt. Like we have had clients who have, say, for instance, like lost children. So, like I think of one specifically who lost a toddler to a drowning incident. And he asked us, what do we do do I put this in there? And our question back to him was obviously that affected your life. How did it affect your life? And so he ended up putting it in his bio, but the bio wasn't about that. The bio was about all the things that made him who he was. And that was another turning point in his life that led him into, he was in real estate. Yeah, led him into real estate. So you want to sort of take your personal, and you always want to not forget your audience, right? Because your audience is always trying to figure out, they're really just interested in themselves. And we're going to get into that a little bit more, right? So how does that hit them? So when you are writing and sharing your personal, you want that personal to always take into fact why that matters to your audience, if that helps. And if that matters to your audience, you need to put it in your messaging. Yeah. So if it doesn't, be mindful and maybe leave it out. So.
Yeah. This point really was something that was a shift for me. So when I first started with my podcast, I got really good at being a host and asking good questions, but almost leaving my personality, myself out of it completely. And actually after the second quarter of doing my podcast, so it was about, I don't even know how, like 180 days into my show, basically at that point, people started telling me, I started asking for feedback, and they're like, hey, we'd like to get to know Alex a little bit more. Like, you do a great job, like basically flowing through a really good conversation, but you're never in the conversation. And it's because I didn't really know what to share, type of thing. But I'll never forget the first time I did actually share something personal. I just kind of threw it in there. The question came up from the guest I had on, asked me a question. I just shared part of my story. And I had never gotten more feedback on the show than that one time where people felt like they actually knew me. And I think that you all kind of just said something that really is key. How did it affect your life, the story that you're sharing? Because people are going to relate to the emotion, not just the story itself, right? If the story is emotionless and it doesn't really matter to you, then it doesn't really do anything for your listeners. You want to be able for people to be able to say, oh, I could feel that. Like when Tonya shared that, like I felt that story, like that relates to me. So I think a really important way to inject the personal is just to throw something in there that really, it is part of who you are. You don't have to give all the details. You don't have to be like, well, this story affects me because A, B, and C. You just share the story, let the passion kind of flow through you, and you can bring it back up in later episodes or something like that. So I think it's a really good point here.
Yeah. And I think too, just maybe another way of saying it is, has it shaped who you are today and why you're doing what you're doing, for who and for whom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for whom, because the people on the other end need to know, why are you doing what you're doing today? How important, and why should I listen? And a lot of that personal injection helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. All right, for sake of time, we got to keep on moving here. We're only through the first one. We got
I know.
5 more to go.
We'll go faster. We'll go faster.
No, it's on me. I'm asking follow-up questions, but it's great content. At the end, we'll give the listeners and the audience here today a chance to ask some questions as well. For sake of time, let's go ahead and move on to number 2, though.
Let's do it. Okay, people, number 2 mistake, people push their profession instead of their purpose.
Mhm.
I'll give you a story. I was on the phone with somebody and she said, I feel like I'm pretty well branded. There are, in my area, when I walk into a restaurant, everybody knows I'm a real estate agent. And I said, well, Sherry, I get that, but let's take a look at this. When you walk in that restaurant and somebody says, oh, there's Sherry, the real estate agent, but they look 2 tables over to the right and there's Michael, the real estate agent, and 3 tables, there's Deborah, the real estate agent. Now, who do you choose, right?
Mhm.
So that coming back to the personal and professional things about that, what is your purpose, right? You're a real estate agent, but what kind? You're a veterinarian, but what kind? So what we say is great branding isn't about being known for your profession. It's about being known for being different in your profession. And that is your purpose.
I think this is probably like the most powerful point when it comes to being a podcast host. This opens like a lot of questions. I'm just going to dive into one of them here, though. As a podcast host, my show is called Creating a Brand, and it's about the art of building a business. So it's not branding or anything like that, but that's the focus of my show. Doesn't have my picture in it, doesn't have my name in it or anything like that. Do you think that that's okay, or would you recommend to people throwing their name somewhere in these things, having a picture of themselves, instead of it just being, again, like mine's very like business heavy and maybe less on the purpose side of things, by me injecting myself and even some of my personal story from that front? What are your thoughts on that?
I think absolutely you need to put your face on. Yeah,
Yep.
I really, that's just what we do. And, and I'm speaking from experience because I didn't do that either. Like when I came back to my hometown here or north of my hometown, and even when I opened a brokerage, I was really just going to let Carolyn run it type of thing. Like I was just like, whatever. But Tonya drugged me into the limelight and she's like, no, you're building the culture. People need to know why they should do business with your company, no matter how big it gets. And I think that fits with podcasters for sure. I think you have to put your face on there, and not so much just the profession. Yeah, it has to be poignant to who you're talking to and the subject matter in which they're interested in. But they need to know who Alex is. I suggest it with every podcaster. You should have your face and likeness on all of your advertising.
All right, good to know. That's convicting for me, so I appreciate that, Michael. It's good. That was good.
Yeah,
good stuff there.
Well, the next one is a real short one. Like we don't settle for what we call the Three Amigos. And to be honest with you, I don't even know where we got that, but we love it, so we stick with it.
There's three musketeers,
the Three Musketeers, the Three Amigos. Don't follow it. The Three Musketeers of marketing is that I have my picture and I have a logo and I have a tagline. So I've got a brand. And that's not true. You have 3 elements of a brand. There are many elements that help build the culture. A brand is a culture. And so you need a lot more. That's barely even a skeleton, right? You've got to get the rest of the why out there. And we'll talk about that here in a minute, about the 5 things that your brand needs to answer. But don't settle for just the fact that you've got your picture on there and you've got a good logo and you've got a tagline. It's not enough.
Yeah, I think that's so important. We kind of touched on that a little bit. So I think that when we get into the why a little bit more, that'd be helpful. But number 4, where we go from here?
They settle for ditto instead of different. And so, you'll notice that in every industry, over time, the business cards start to look alike. The websites start to look alike, that all of these things start to look alike. And you wonder, oh my gosh, again, it goes back to just being known for your profession and not for your, purpose or for being different. But when you infuse why you're different into that, it makes all the difference, pun intended.
People get nervous about this one, though, because going against the status quo can be like, it's intimidating sometimes when you're like, okay, I'm injecting more of myself to be different. That's not what the industry is doing. Like, how are people going to relate to that, or how are they going to like receive that type of thing? What are your thoughts on someone who says like being different is scary? Because it can be for a lot of us.
Absolutely.
Let us quantify different, right? If you had a podcast or even a business, or anything like that, and you said, we're the best, I have the best. It is the best, right? We don't know what best is to our listeners. We don't know what best is to our customers. We don't know what best is to our clients. We don't know what best is. So you have to decide to be different, to be known to be different in your profession, because then that's inarguable. And that's a true hook. When you say I'm the first podcaster, or if you say, we are, like my brand, we're anything real estate, right? That's different. That nobody can argue that we're not anything real estate. We do everything in every genre of real estate,
including auctions.
Including auctions. Like
right.
Nobody can say we're not anything real estate. So it's, once you have that point of differentiation, is what we call that, then you have that hook you can build on, and your audience will be attracted to that. And we find, obviously, like also your haters are far less, because of course we love haters, don't get me wrong, because they're a good opportunity for you to get stuff rolling into conversations. Sure. But it's still an inarguable point, and that's the reason you want to try to go for different. So don't be afraid of different. Different's great. Different's attractive. It is.
Tonya, with your experience, how often do you end up having to help people discover they're different? Like, is that something that you find that many people aren't really sure what different means for them?
I hear it every day. And I would say about 90% of the time, we have to figure out which thing that is different about them that they put forward, right? Because everybody has multiple points of differentiation. There's not just one thing that's different about you. If I were to ask each one of you on this call today, what's different about you? Name one thing. Not a one of you could name one thing. You're going to name 10 or 12 or 5 or 18. So we have to figure out, then comes the personal branding formula into play, right? And that means your ideal customers, the ones that you're trying to attract into your life and your business, what is significant to them? So what is different about you that's also meaningful and important to them? And that's where the magic, formula comes into play. Once you figure that out, what is that differentiation I'm going to lead with, that marketing hook, if you will, to allow the doors to open for me to tell the rest of my story.
Tonya, this is like just a key point right here. So important. I think of as you're sharing that, I was thinking of Vanessa Van Edwards, and she has a company and she branded it first off by finding her different, which was the fact that she is a recovering awkward person, as she said that. And when she launched her company, she just dove into her story about how she was weird during high school, she was weird during college. Now she's in business and she's still just a major introvert, and how she's I'm a recovering awkward person. And she when I had the opportunity to talk to her, she said, I expected to help maybe 100 people because I figured that was all that were really like me out there. She goes, but I dove so deep into this story and what made me so different and unique and a recovering awkward person. She now has, when I checked recently, she has over 100,000 people that are paying in her community that are also recovering awkward people, as they call themselves. So that was really her diving into her different and where she could actually help somebody. So it's exactly what you're sharing them. That is absolutely a key principle there. So I'm glad you dove into that one.
Yeah, it is about leading with that differentiation and boiling that down. It's hard to do. It really is. It'll lead us into number 5.
Let's hear it.
People are afraid that to lead with different would box them in. It won't box you in. We especially deal with this with clients that deal with multiple verticals inside their organizations, where they sell a lot of different products, or they can work with a lot of different clients that have the same need, mortgage brokers, insurance agents, real estate agents, they can work with just about anybody. So when we talk to them about leading with a point of differentiation, they immediately seize up and go, wait just a minute. The first thought is, okay, well, I either don't know what makes me different, or there's 100 things that make me different. So we've got to narrow that down into a leader, like Tonya said. And then the next section that they say is, well, won't that box me in? Won't that limit my capacity to do business? And the truth of the matter is, and she's living proof of this for sure. I am also on the real estate side. That's not true. It doesn't box you in. It actually defines you and stops you from any kind of confusion. Number one, from the inside of your office door, and the confusion your message may be sending out to outside of your door. And so that's probably really important to your listeners, because you want to stick with it. Like what it is that you've decided is going to be your platform, you want to stick with that platform until you have perfected it in every way, shape, or form on both sides of that office door.
Yeah, this is just, again, another point that's just so powerful. I've told many people this when I was doing coaching and podcasting, that if your listener is, or your podcast is for everybody, it's for nobody, because nobody is everybody, right? It's
Right.
got to be for somebody specific. So when I jump on podcast, I share pretty narrow. And sometimes I've even questioned, like, man, is this too much? But at the end of the day, I know that I'm going to speak to the people that I can speak to that can relate to my purpose, going back to number 2 that you were talking about there, like as it relates to me as a person, that those people are going to find me. And here's the thing, if there's 20 people listening to a podcast or 50, whatever it is, and 2 or 3 of them are ideal for me to be working with, and they really get something from my story, and I continue to speak to them, that's better than me talking to 1,000 people and just being really general and nothing coming of it, right? It doesn't really help. It's just a good episode maybe, or maybe mediocre because it's me, or whatever you want to call it, right? So, but really great point here. I'm glad that we dove into that. But so moving on to number 6 here.
All right. This is the biggest one to me, and I see it all the time. They choose to market themselves before the brand is built. That's a huge mistake, because if we think about it, we're just putting something out there, and that's where we end up being in what we call the sea of sameness, because our marketing pretty much looks like everybody else in our industry, right? And we're just saying the same things. The photo kind of looks the same. Again, the website looks the same. What are we going to say to bring people into the fold? Well, you got to ask yourself this question. What on earth, how would you even know what to put into your marketing to attract kind of people you want to attract, unless first of all, you know who it is you want to attract? You've got to define that first, define what sets you apart, define those things that that person is going to appreciate in what sets you apart, and build the brand around that. And so trying to market before you put the brand, before the brand is built, is just wasting money.
You know, the way that you can tell if this is happening is if you're working with, this is for everyone in attendance and listen to the replay, is if you're working with somebody who's helping you with marketing or sales, and they tell you need to spend more money to get more results because of how competitive it is, it means you're doing something wrong, because the solution should never be spend more money to get better results. Now, if you are seeing good results, then yes, spend more money because you're seeing good results, but never spend more to get more. You all agree with that?
Absolutely.
You couldn't have said it better.
Absolutely, because that is where your true ROI is, and you in your marketing. That's how you stop wasting marketing dollars. And I think you said it best. Don't spend more to get the results that you're looking at. You get the results and then spend all you can spend, because you got a trackable ROI. And that is possible in every industry. And your numbers are going to tell you that. You should pay attention to those numbers. You're constantly A/B testing. You're constantly looking at how you can reach out and reach into another corner to pull in another client or another listener or another customer or another person interested in what you're doing. But I agree with you 100%. You can do that with small dollars and prove that it works, and then just duplicate that, wash, rinse, repeat. And that's a much better business model than just going out here and just spending a lot of money. We see it in these industries all the time. And it makes me curl when, every time I cringe, every time I hear somebody say, well, I mean, I'll just get a few more deals, and then I'll start working on my marketing, get a few more deals, and then I'll build my brand. And we're like, look, I know
what kind of deals are you trying to get?
Where you're coming from, but I promise you, if you will build that brand first, and then you'll be loyal to that brand, other people are going to be loyal to that brand, just as loyal to that brand as you're loyal to that brand. You're going to have a lot better experience in what you're doing in your sales, especially if it's like a high ticket item where you're spending a lot of time with those clients. Why pull your hair out with the wrong client? You want to attract the client you want to work with. So to you guys in podcasts and stuff, you want to reach the ear of the listener. I promise you, there's 7.5 billion people on earth. I promise whatever you want your podcast to be about, you've got more audience than you could ever take care of, right? So don't be afraid to pull these things in to build your brand first, and then attract those people that you specifically want.
And don't get caught up in audience size. Don't get caught up in that. You don't need 100,000 downloads a day to have a very successful podcast. What it takes to have a successful podcast is to connect with people that appreciate what you bring to the table, right? They desire that type of information and guidance and nurturing and coaching and so forth. And once you hit that, I've always said, when digital marketing first came along and everything was about impressions, how many impressions did that ad get, which is so ridiculous these days, right? But I always used to say, I don't want to impress 50,000 people. I just want to talk to 50 who are interested in what I have to say.
That's so well said. You know, I have a friend named Melinda, and she's a multimillionaire, doesn't work too many hours, works the way she wants to, and has a really great tribe that follows her. I saw her speak at a conference and had the opportunity to meet with her and sit with her. And she goes, Alex, can I tell you a secret? I'm like, sure. She goes, I've only helped 1,200 people ever. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah, my podcast doesn't have very many listeners. My business doesn't have too many customers. She goes, it's about 1,200 people. She goes, but those people are with me with anything that I do. And she goes, and she goes, I advertise to my people and their people that are just like them. And that's it. And that's all that she's doing. And for her, like, it's working. She's not trying to be like, I need to help more than 10,000 people. I want, or 100,000 people or a million. She was just saying, hey, this is my tribe. It's 1,200 people, and it's working really great
I was
for her.
about to say,
so good.
That's Seth Godin's tribe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It is true. It's absolutely true. You'll drive yourself crazy trying to get likes and followers and stuff like that. And of course there's ways you can pay for that, ways you can get that up, but it doesn't help you if they're not buying from you, if they're not listening to your message and part of your culture, a part of the culture that you're building. And I do that as a broker. I don't want 2,000 agents and still only have 25, 30 producers. I want 25 or 30 producers all the time. And I want to take the 25, 30, 40. Now, do I hope it grows to 2,000? Of course, but I'm going to have 2,000 producers because I'm starting with that. Because if I can't help them, they can't help other people. We don't need it to be that big. It doesn't have to be something that's worldwide yet.
Right. This has been a super fun conversation so far. Before we end, I know we have just a few minutes here. I want to make sure we get all the wisdom out of you guys that we possibly can. You have something else to share on this topic?
We could talk for months.
We could.
We love it.
And then just give me a final thought. Each of you, just a final thought for everyone in attendance today and for the people watching the replay, and then we'll open up the Q&A.
All right.
Okay, sounds good. So where Brandface came from, really, and part of my story is I realized at a fairly young age, in dealing with a family that was just ridden with alcoholism and addiction, I realized the only difference between a young man sitting on a stoop waiting for his next drug delivery and a young man with a briefcase in his hand headed off to college was self-worth, was belief in himself and knowing that he is very special. There's a star inside. And so what Brandface is all about is unveiling the inner star. And so that's what I want each of you to know, that think about unveiling your own inner star, because you all have it inside of you.
Agreed.
That's great.
Mine's a little simpler. Take what she said and be bold about it. Be bold about it. If people ask me, what would you change about the life that you lived? The only thing that I would change is I would have been bolder sooner.
I love that. That's something I actually write down every day for myself, is to be bold with what I believe and in the direction I'm heading. And I think that's a great thing. So where can everyone find out more about you? And I'll drop some links in the chat as well, and then we'll open Q&A.
Sure. So discussyourbrand.com is where you want to go. If you want to just talk with us, you can kind of pick an area there, but brandfacestar.com is where you want to go to learn more about us. And that'll kind of give you some more insight into, who we are and our story and how we can help you.
Love it. Well, very cool. Well, I really appreciate both of you being here. This has been a lot of fun. I learned a lot from this conversation. So thanks so much for the time.
Thank you for having us on.
You're so welcome.
Actually, love it.
And actually, I'm going to flip the tables on you, Alex.
Okay.
We would love to learn more about you. Would you come on our podcast?
That would be awesome. I would love that.
It's called Be Bold Branding. You fit right in.
Yeah, I saw it. I've checked it out. Thank you. That's cool. Well, I appreciate you guys' time. Thank you so much.
For sure.
You're so welcome.